Good evening and welcome to the Simpson College Town Hall for students and parents. We're all so glad that you could join us tonight. Starting us off will be President Marcia Kelleher.
Good evening. We're eagerly anticipating the return of all of our students to campus. As you'll hear, the safety of our students and the Simpson community has been and will continue to be our first priority. We've spent this spring and summer preparing for their return and creating ways for students to have an enriching experience both inside and outside of the classroom. While many things are going to be different, the things that matter most will be the same, which is our commitment to preparing students for lives of meaning and purpose. Our accomplished faculty will continue to be more than teachers, but mentors who work one-on-one with students. And our staff will continue to provide a host of support services that ensure students have everything they need to succeed, from academic counseling, leadership development, emotional support, spiritual development, social opportunities, and much more. Thank you for joining us tonight to learn more about what the Simpson experience will be this fall. Heidi Levine, the Vice President of Student Development and Planning, will provide an overview of the safety procedures and protocols that will be in place when the students arrive.
Thank you, President Kelleher, and it's wonderful to see all of you. For our students who are with us this evening, we are so excited that just a little over a week from now, we're going to be welcoming you back because we have missed you so much. As President Kelleher mentioned, I am the Vice President for Student Development and Planning. I also have the privilege of chairing our crisis management team. And so some of what I'm going to be talking about falls outside of the normal student development realm, but it is more about the process that we've had and the protocols that we've put in place. And so I'm actually going to start there. Hopefully everybody has received emails from us over the summer that updated you on what our safety protocols are and letting you know like what we're going to need as we prepare for the start of the year. So you may be familiar with the fact that we have created a 4 color-coded operational model that we are functioning within. And we are currently in the orange phase of that model. That's where we will be through at least the first 2 weeks of the semester. And while we're operating in that phase, our focus is really on doing everything we can to basically create a new bubble for our community that is as safe and healthy a bubble as we possibly can. So the elements of that orange protocol involve some reductions in what classrooms look like, and our new academic dean, John Wool, will be talking to you a little bit in a little bit about academics. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with that, but also in orange, a pretty heavy reliance on really minimizing large group gatherings, maintaining social distance, using masks, taking advantage of all of the recommendations of experts like the Centers for Disease Control and the Iowa Department of Public Health, on whose guidelines we have modeled our program and our protocols. Our hope is that we can fairly quickly settle into a kind of that new community bubble that we are hoping to create in such a way that we are not seeing community spread of COVID on campus. And as long as that is not happening and we are not seeing community spread in our surrounding community, we would be able to move out of the orange phase and into the yellow phase, where some of the elements are still the same. I think we are all going to be wearing masks a lot of the time, or most of the time, until there is a vaccine available. And we are still going to be practicing social distancing until there is a vaccine available. But as we move into yellow, we have more flexibility about gathering sizes and about what social interactions are going to look like on campus. We also have built into that protocol what would be the conditions under which we would be going back to red, which is basically where we have been at the end of the spring semester and a May term. when the vast majority of our students left campus and we went to remote learning. And what would send us there would be if we are seeing widespread community spread and kind of exponential growth of cases on campus, if among our faculty and staff we were seeing significant spread and absenteeism, or if in our surrounding community there was significant spread. We've put a lot of precautions in place that we truly believe if we all come together as a community and are caring not only for ourselves, but more importantly, caring for each other, we can avoid doing that. And so those precautions include things like wearing masks when we are within 6 feet of somebody other than roommates in the cases of our students. Daily check-ins. So you should have all received an email from me earlier this week that talked about our Moodle site that we created, that we are having all students, faculty, and staff check in on every weekday morning so that we can monitor what is happening on campus, follow up with any students who report that they may be experiencing COVID symptoms, and also be very carefully tracking what, if any, spread are we seeing on the campus. I am really excited to tell you that we are in the final phases of what has been long conversations with the Iowa Department of Public Health, who have been able to help our college campuses around the state partner with Test Iowa and to allow our campuses to become Test Iowa sites specifically for our campus communities. We are in the last steps of putting all of that into place. And what that means is that if we have students or faculty or staff members who are either symptomatic or who are in close contact with somebody who is tested positive, that we will be able to do that COVID testing on campus for free. So that is a tremendous, tremendous step forward for us. So those are some of the measures that we have in place. I do want to say that we are not doing widespread, what is referred to by the CDC as entrance testing. We are not testing every student before they arrive on campus or check. And that decision is actually consistent with the recommendation of the Centers for Disease Control. The CDC does not recommend that campuses test every student, simply because for that to be meaningful would mean that we were having to be retesting every student with a frequency that really just does not make a lot of sense, and given the limited availability of tests would be nearly impossible, if not completely impossible, to carry out. So all of these protocols are consistent with CDC recommendations. And again, all designed to help keep us all as healthy as we possibly can be. So let me talk a little bit about some of what student life outside of the classroom is going to look like as we start the semester. So in the residence halls, again, we are treating roommates as basically family units so that people are not having to be wearing masks when they're in their rooms. When students are out and about in other parts of the residence halls, just as when they're out and about in other parts of campus, we are going to expect them to be wearing face coverings. We have been working with our campus services in order to make sure that we have got really robust cleaning protocols in place. That involves cleaning all of the common bathrooms twice a day, every day, again, following the CDC's guidelines for those practices. And you will probably also notice things like sinks that are taped off to indicate how we want people to be distancing themselves when they're using those facilities. We do have spaces that are set aside to use in the event that we have a student who becomes ill and needs to isolate themselves, or who is exposed to somebody who is tested positive for COVID and needs to be quarantined. We are going to primarily be making use of our apartments for those purposes, so that students who are in isolation or quarantine have access to a private kitchen, not shared bathrooms, so that again, we can keep both them and the rest of the community as safe as possible. Dining in orange phase is going to be grab and go. So we have worked with Sodexo to make sure that they've got good options that are available in both Kent and Pfeiffer. Because it's grab and go in Pfeiffer, what they're going to be doing is working with students who can take multiple containers, both hot and cold, with them when they come in, so that even though they don't have the ability to go back up to the serving line during the same visit, they can get what they need in order to be keeping themselves well nourished at each of those meal periods. And the early feedback we have from some of our student athletes who came back early is that, like, they're surprised that the portions that they're able to get to take with them exceed what they had feared that they were going to be seeing. So we've got a system that is set up that I think is going to work well for us through Orange. Once we get into that yellow phase, then we will open up on-site dining opportunities, but taking advantage of some additional spaces we'll be using so that we can spread those out. We are also working really closely with Rich Ramos and members of CAB to figure out how do we do programming in order to have a life on campus that feels like something even remotely like normal when we're not able to be in groups of more than 10 and when we need to be maintaining distance from each other. So they have been hard at work figuring out things like, how do we do some socially distanced bingo? Are we doing some things that are still going to be virtual? I think one of the mantras that we have developed in student development is figuring out how we can be together but distanced. And so making use of the outdoors as much as possible early in the year. There will be some special events that have gotten special approval from the crisis management team that will offer us some opportunities to come together in groups larger than 10. And Rich just has a wealth of ideas about how to make use of the technology and the spaces we have so that we can be as innovative as possible. We'll say he is also working with our fraternity and sorority programs to think through what recruitment looks like, and again, to bring as much connection, engagement, and normalcy to our campus in a period that is still nothing like what normal life is like for any of us, whether that's on campus or off. So that's a kind of high-level overview of the planning we've been doing thus far. I am going to, it's like my joy to get to introduce my new colleague, John Wool, who is our new Senior Vice President and Academic Dean, and then we'll be happy to respond to other questions that you have later on this evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Heidi, for the handoff. I am John Wool. I'm the Senior Vice President and Academic Dean at Simpson College. I am new to Simpson. I moved here from Michigan 3 weeks ago today. I started work remotely in early July, and I'm really excited about the opportunities we have ahead. It's good to be with you this evening. I look forward to meeting many of you personally over the coming months, obviously at an appropriate distance and likely with a mask on. You all know full well by now that this will be far from a typical semester at Simpson College, but I've been deeply impressed by the work all our faculty and staff have been doing over the spring and summer to prepare. These are challenging times, but the work on campus shows that Simpson College is well prepared to meet that challenge. I can tell you that the crisis management team and individual faculty have been incredibly creative and innovative in thinking about ways to keep our students safe as we return to face-to-face learning. Simpson's faculty and staff are focused on providing a high-quality academic experience despite the unprecedented challenges that we're facing. The college's COVID page contains significant explanations about our current status, our policies and plans, as well as an excellent list of FAQs. Our new Vice President for Marketing and Strategic Communications is working diligently with her staff to keep this list up to date and readable for the variety of audiences it serves. So a few highlights from that list, as well as maybe some details that you don't have at this point. just around classroom management and interactions with faculty. Beginning in orange means that classroom capacities will be at 50% of their limits for face-to-face instruction. For many faculty, this means moving a small class to a larger room. For some faculty, it might mean teaching outside. We're working on some outdoor classroom spaces, at least for the nicer weather. For other faculty, this could mean splitting the class into groups that attend on alternate days. Whatever the plans for meeting with students are face-to-face, faculty have been asked to be clear about them at the beginning of the semester, post their expectations on their syllabi, and ensure that the plan is online on the course's Moodle sites so that they're clear to all students in the course. It's a significant logistical shift that needs to be clearly communicated, but faculty have risen to the challenge thus far. Because of the shift in face-to-face requirements and classroom capacities, many courses will technically be, I guess, what you'd call hybrid, or what higher ed this summer decided to call high flex. Such courses offer a blend of online, synchronous, face-to-face, and asynchronous instruction, which allows students to move seamlessly across different modalities. Such courses allow students and instructors to meet objectives in multiple ways and to meet requirements for assignments across different modes should a student need to be absent for an extended period of time. The courses should also be well positioned to move quickly to an online modality should an instructor or a student need to isolate or quarantine. And our faculty have done well to build courses that provide that kind of flexibility. Obviously, the shift in what we mean by face-to-face instruction will require faculty to shift face-to-face attendance requirements. So faculty are well prepared for students who might need to learn outside the classroom for short periods or maybe longer periods of time. Faculty will communicate all their attendance, online check-in, and Zoom or other meeting requirements clearly at the beginning of the semester, keep them updated, and keep students in the loop as best they can. Building community under such circumstances can be difficult. Fortunately, Simpson College is an exceptional instructional designer who's worked very closely with our faculty in developing courses that can be engaging across a number of different modalities. More than half of our faculty have completed what we call the Simpson Online Faculty Academy, SOFA for short, I think for where most of our faculty did their work. And this is designed to help faculty build high quality, flexible learning environments that are engaging for students and help students not just engage with their faculty members, but also to engage with each other across multiple platforms. Faculty have been trained to use video and Zoom to record lectures and to encourage students to do the same, to use video and Zoom when possible. We've also been working on traffic and airflow in individual buildings to conform as best we can to guidelines for social distancing and to CDC guidelines about airflow. Current guidance calls the, exposures of under 15 minutes at a distance of 6 feet or more with masks on safe. And we've tried to design traffic flows that will well exceed those expectations. So passing in hallways, through doorways, and so on will continue to be safe if we use masks in buildings. And we've done work to limit extended exposures across campus and in classroom spaces as well. Contact tracing for faculty and students is managed by the Iowa Department of Public Health. Such tracing is only as good as our records, so we've asked faculty to keep close track of attendance and seating in classes. And we're really asking everybody to chip in and keep track of their contact with students, faculty, and staff across campus. We're also asking that our faculty and our staff limit their exposures to outside contacts as best they're able in order to keep our bubble around campus relatively small. Our modified face-to-face plan provides you and your students with a lot of flexibility, and we hope that your students will find novel ways of flourishing in the new environment. We do ask that students keep faculty informed as things change with regard to their health or their attendance, either by contacting an advisor, a roommate, a CA, someone who can reach out to their faculty. And that means that we just request that someone, a roommate, a friend, a CA, an advisor, has copies of class registrations and schedules for your individual students so that we can do a better job of keeping track. My office, the Dean's office here at Simpson, is certainly here to help as we move through these difficult times. We're happy to offer whatever resources and support we can to continue to provide an exceptional experience for our students. Despite the challenges, I am looking forward to a good year, my first year, like many of your students, as we move forward through this semester. And I look forward to seeing all of you soon. Kathy Cole, I think, is now going to help us answer any questions that you might have.
I am. Thank you, John. Right now, we're going to get to as many questions as we possibly can. We don't have all night, but we have some time with you tonight, and we're excited. Please submit your questions and comments through the chat function, and I will read them aloud and assign them to the administrator most appropriate to answer your question. With no further ado, we're going to get to the very first question. Will exposed students be separated from positive students?
Yes. So, and I think I saw several questions coming in about isolation and quarantine. So I may try to hit a number of these. So our goal is to remove students who need to be either isolated or quarantined from the regular living environment and from other students, and to keep them as separate as possible. And again, just because these two terms, get used and it gets confusing. People who are ill need to isolate. People who have been exposed need to quarantine. We will not be putting them together because we would certainly not want to re-expose somebody who had already been exposed by putting them in an apartment with somebody that we knew was COVID positive. As much as possible, we're going to keep people in single units, but if we have to be doubling up at all, make sure that we are not cross-contaminating in those situations. There were also questions about how we will be checking in on those students who might need to be isolated or quarantined. Our Director of Health Services will be checking in with them daily. So we will be having regular, probably Zoom or telephone contact with all of them so that we can either continue to monitor whether they are experiencing any symptoms for those who were exposed, and to be tracking how they are doing physically for those who actually tested positive, and to help them get any additional medical attention that they might need. We will also be making sure that we get food delivered to them, because if someone is in isolation or quarantine, we do not want them going to Pfeiffer or going to Kent. They really need to stay in their apartment. So we will be doing daily food drop-offs at their apartment, of both some things that are already prepared, but things they can also have on stock in that kitchen. Again, one of the reasons that we want to use the apartments is so that they have access to that kitchen during that period of quarantine or isolation.
Thank you, Heidi. Another question I think is going to go right back to you is, in the red phase, are students free to visit other dorm rooms?
So I'm going to start off by saying that I don't think that question really is about the red phase, because in the red phase, we hardly have anybody on campus. So the red phase is the remote learning phase. So I'm going to assume that that was not really the question. If it was, please chat back and I'll go back to it. In the orange phase, which is where we are starting, students may not visit other students' rooms. So the only rooms that students may be in are their own, and the only residence hall or apartment building that students may be in is their own. So we really, during that early part of the semester, we are keeping pretty close tabs on everything, because again, we want We want the community to settle into our new bubble and to minimize the chance that we're seeing community spread happening.
Thanks, Heidi. Another question, probably to John. Have we looked at maybe going to an A-B class schedule, or have we looked into switching to a school year that looks more like Cornell College?
So those discussions were entered into very early in the summer, and our thinking at the time, and this continues to be our thinking, is that our best way to manage what we have going forward is to stick with our traditional class schedule and provide flexibility for faculty and students to manage their classes in the way that they see fit, so that our faculty can meet the educational goals that they have for the individual courses while providing greater flexibility across the modes of delivery.
Thank you. If students are asked to leave campus again for the red phase, how will they be compensated? If students do not have a place to stay, will they be able to stay on campus?
I'm going to answer the second part of that, and then I'm going to ask my colleague Kathy Hook, our Vice President for Business Affairs, to respond to the second, or to what was the first part. So like in the spring, if we do need to switch to fully remote learning, we will again allow students who need to be on campus for a wide range of reasons to remain. And those, again, are likely to be things like not having a stable home to return to or a safe home to return to. It might be not having sufficient broadband access at home. It might be that they are student teaching or doing an internship or something that would require them to be here. So we will again make arrangements that would allow some students to remain on campus in the event that we go back to a red phase.
Great, and I will answer the question about compensation if students are required to return home. We will obviously look at that the same way that we viewed the situation in the spring, and we'll work to provide refunds to students, certainly if that is possible, and that would be our goal, would be to treat everyone fairly in that situation.
Okay, thank you for that. So are students being asked to test for COVID before arriving on campus?
They are not. And again, the CDC is not recommending entrance testing, and that would be kind of a variation on the entrance testing. Though certainly if somebody wanted to and was able to access that testing, there's nothing that would disallow that. What we are asking students to do is to start monitoring symptoms and practice entering that into the Moodle site now. Partly because we want them to get in the habit, but also we want you to be paying attention to, are you experiencing a sudden loss of smell or taste, or developing a new cough or difficulty breathing or other symptoms of COVID? Because if that's happening, then in that case, it might be beneficial for you should certainly be reaching out to your doctor, perhaps to be tested and to be making a decision about, do you come to campus immediately, or might you want to wait before you move into campus? I had seen that question came up in this about communities that lost power this week, and I have gotten lots of emails from students about that. We know that we've got communities, particularly in the northeast part of Iowa, that just got slammed by the storm 2 days ago. We are not going to penalize anybody if they're not doing their Moodle check-ins because they don't have internet access. So please don't worry about that. But do be tracking your symptoms, do get in the habit of taking your temperature every morning, and start logging into that Moodle site as soon as you're able.
What will people living in apartments do about grocery shopping as they will have to leave campus?
So in general, we are not restricting students from leaving campus. We know that there are students who have jobs. There are students who have relationships, they have families, they have reasons that they need to leave campus. And they may choose to go to Hy-Vee or someplace else and stock up on groceries for their apartment. So they can definitely do that. Students who live in apartments also have meal plans, so that they have that option of getting food from Pfeiffer and Kent as well. So either of those would be an option. And again, if we're talking about a student who has been temporarily placed in an apartment because they're being isolated or quarantined, we will be getting food to them because we don't want that student going out and grocery shopping.
Heidi, here's another one for you. If it is necessary for students to return home, will they be permitted to isolate on campus before returning to their home communities?
Yeah, we had situations in the spring where that happened. We had students who had to return early from study abroad experiences, and who, because of family members' medical conditions, needed to have a period where they were quarantining so that they knew that they were not bringing COVID home with them. That would certainly be the case again, should we need to return to red.
Okay. Simpson has stated it is opening in phase orange, which includes 6 feet of social distancing and wearing of masks. However, certain activities were exempted, such as some athletic events. What is the complete list of remaining activities that will not follow phase orange specifications?
So actually, athletics, since we issued that guidance, has changed pretty significantly. You may have seen that the American Rivers Conference presidents voted late on Monday to postpone most fall athletics. So the only sports that we know are going to be competing this fall are golf and tennis. There's a possibility that cross country may be competing. That is still being considered. And those sports that are going to be competing are sports that the NCAA has deemed to be low risk because they don't involve people in close proximity to each other, and they also take place outdoors. So at this point, most of the activities that are going to be going on campus are going to be things that people can do while remaining 6 feet apart and wearing masks. I don't know if there are any things that are going on in the academic realm that might be different, and so I would invite Dean Wohl, if there's anything that he would want to add to that, to feel free to jump in.
So I think this combines a little bit with another question further down about music ensembles and things like that. We have a full plan from the music department that's been vetted and reviewed by the crisis management team for finding ways to safely lead lessons, have vocal ensembles, have band and things like that. Most of it involves, being outside for at least the first part of the year. As well as providing adequate distance among singers or people in band and orchestra and things of that nature. So to the extent that we're able, we'll continue to have some of those activities, but again, those will not necessarily be exempt from the guidelines that you see, but they will be done within the guidelines as they've been laid out and reviewed by the crisis management team.
Thank you both. How will laundry services be treated? How often will they be sanitized, or will that be up to the individual to take care of?
So again, all of the common spaces in residence halls are going to be following cleaning protocols that are consistent with what CDC and other experts recommend. That would include laundry facilities. We don't have a laundry service, so students do their own laundry. They will continue to do their own laundry. And when they are in the laundry area, they should be wearing a mask. And if there are other people in there, they should be maintaining 6 feet of distance from them.
What is being recommended if students' roommates are not following the phase orange protocols with regards to visitors in the room?
Yeah, and I had seen other questions I think that came up about compliance in general. So let me just talk about compliance in general. We're going to be treating this really seriously because our ability to make this work so that we can be together in the way we all so desperately want to be together is contingent on all of us doing our part and living within the guidelines. I don't love wearing a mask. That is like so far from my favorite thing, but I do. Like when I am out and about, when I am talking to somebody in my office, I've got a mask on my face. So we all need to be willing to do our parts. If a student is concerned about their roommate's behavior, I strongly recommend that they talk with their CA or with the assistant director of residence life in charge of their building. That would be either Taylor Keitzer or Elise Morris. If students show up to a class without a mask, they're going to be told they have to leave. I have already seen students trying to enter the Kent Campus Center without masks on, whom I have said, like, you're going to be in the building, you need to have a mask. If you don't have it with you, you need to go back to your room and you need to get it, but you cannot come in here without a mask. We all are going to have to be willing to challenge people. If we get reports about students who are consistently not following protocols, they're not wearing masks, they're gathering in large groups, or who are missing multiple days of doing their Moodle daily check-in, we will be handling that through our student conduct process. And so we will definitely be holding students accountable because, again, our ability to do this rests with all of us living by the protocols and following them closely.
Thank you. When it was mentioned that the level would shift based on significant numbers, can you please define that more accurately? Is it based on okay. Go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and there are some schools that have looked at percentages of the student body or percentages of residents. And as our crisis management team was talking about what our protocols were going to be, felt like picking an arbitrary percentage just felt arbitrary. And instead, what we wanted to do was to have some kind of indicators that would tell us that we were seeing significant community spread. And so what is built into the protocol, and if you go to that protocol that's on the website, you'll see that this is in here as the trigger for red, that one of those triggers is that over a 3 to 5 day period, we were seeing a daily doubling in cases. And so what that could look like is if on one day we had 2 positive cases and the next day there were 4 new positive cases, followed by 8 new positive cases, followed by 16, followed by 32. If in that kind of short time frame we were seeing that rapid a growth, that to us would be a signal that there was exponential community spread that was taking place, and that is one of the things that could send us back to red.
Will positivity rates be shared with the community on a regular basis?
Yes, they will. So we have been building a dashboard that will be available on SC Connect to all faculty, staff, and students. It's going to be updated on a weekly basis, and it will show new positive cases, total positive cases, and active positive cases.
If a student tests positive, does everyone who has a class with them get notified?
No, good question, Kathy. So what public health experts tell us is that exposure happens, as John had alluded to earlier, that the greatest risk of exposure is when somebody is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. That is why paying attention to seating in classrooms will really matter, and why we're being really careful about things like dining and group gatherings, particularly early on in the semester. So what we will be doing is working hand in hand with Warren County Public Health to identify who are the people that a student or a faculty or staff member may have been in that close proximity for 15 minutes or more, so that we can reach out to those people and let them know that they should quarantine and might want to be tested. And again, we should have that testing capability available to us on campus for free.
Will students return home for winter break? And if so, can they isolate before returning home?
So winter break is going to be coming early this year. You may recall that the part of the reason that we are starting early is so that we can finish early. And the reason for that is so that we don't have students dispersing broadly during fall break and then coming back, which would result in us having to reset our bubble. So when we get to Thanksgiving break, students will be going home and the residence halls will be generally closing for the break. Students will do the last day of class and their final exams remotely the week after Thanksgiving. Students who live in apartments, residents can stay there throughout the year. The apartments don't close, so they wouldn't have to worry about it. If a student lives in one of our traditional residence halls, and again, particularly if there is a family member at home where there would be increased risk to them, we can work with them to figure out what would be available that would allow them to do that quarantine period before returning home.
Is the Director of Health Services the nurse? And if she is she going to be full-time this semester?
She is, that is the, yes. So the Director of Health Services is the nurse. And while she is not going to be full-time, we have added a second nurse who just started this week and is pretty wonderful. And also has had experience doing COVID-related work, including testing. So that is a bonus to us. So we will have full-time coverage in health services.
That's good to know. John, you talked about airflow. Barker Hall seems to already have a problem with airflow. Is there anything being done about that?
So I can tell you that facility services has gone through all of our buildings, making sure that that we are maximizing the airflow and doing what we need to do to comply with industry standards. I know Kathy Hoke is the person who works directly with SSC. I don't know if there's anything, there may not be anything more that she can add to that, but if so, I would encourage her to jump in.
I would just comment that they are following standards from ASHRA, and one of the things that they are doing is they have, and to ensure that all of our systems are working at the appropriate capacities and as well as they possibly can. And one of the main things that helps with air quality related to COVID is actually bringing in more air from the outside. And so those are the things that they are doing, making sure filters are appropriate. And they've really spent a large amount of the summer on that work. So it is a top priority.
Thank you both. If a child tests positive, are we going to ask them to be taken home?
So if somebody is positive and home is nearby and there are not family members who would be at significant risk from COVID exposure, that is certainly an option. And we know that there are some students and families who that is what they would prefer. But we are not going to require that students who become ill leave for home. We know that there are many who can't for a variety of reasons, and that's part of why we have plans in place to be able to isolate them on campus.
Are students living in the apartments going to be informed if someone is sick or under quarantine is living amongst them?
There would not be somebody who is sick or being quarantined that would be placed in an apartment with anybody that was not in similar conditions. Again, we've got spaces set aside specifically for this use. Simply living in the same building isn't going to put somebody at risk. Again, that risk would come from close contact that's not going to happen simply from being in the same building. And we are instructing those who are quarantining and isolating to not leave for that period. We will bring what they need to them so that we're not having them moving around the building and creating further exposure.
Have we increased our counseling capacity? How have we prepared if we lose a member of the Simpson family to COVID?
So we have increased the counseling staff recently. It is stable from where it has been the past few years. I can tell you that in the late spring, the counseling staff got really adept at doing counseling, making use of telehealth so that they could stay in touch with people closely and not be trying to do counseling with masks on, which would be challenging. So they are well prepared. And they are ready and know that the anxiety and all of the emotional challenges that go along with this are very real. They are prepared to help our students deal with that. I will also tell you that we have had incidents that have happened on campus, including the sudden death of beloved faculty and staff members and of students in recent years that lead me to know that our staff is well equipped, along with our chaplain, Mara Bailey, to step in and to provide the kind of support that our community needs when those tragedies occur.
Great. Oops. Does our contact tracing program work if a food worker or maintenance worker tests positive?
Yep. So even those folks who work for third-party contractors like our dining and facility services, they are also doing daily check-ins, and they know that part of their protocol, if a staff member becomes ill, they have to be informing us so that we can put those same contact tracing methods to work in those cases as well as we would if it was one of our employees or students.
When will out-of-state students know if they've been approved for online classes for the fall semester?
So we're building a process and flow for this right now. The form and everything should be available by the end of the week. And students will be notified within 3 business days of submitting the request.
The CDC recommends that colleges immediately suspend classes and activities for 2 to 5 days to allow time to disinfect and contact trace. Will Simpson follow this guidance?
At present, we don't have a suspension of all activities built into our plans in the event that somebody tests positive. We have been working with SSC to develop protocols for managing the disinfecting of any space, say a classroom that was occupied by somebody who tests positive. And that's the plan that we've got at this point in time.
Do older faculty members or those with vulnerable family members have the option of teaching entirely remotely? Do students have the option to learn entirely remotely?
So with regard to faculty and staff, we've provided accommodations, medical accommodations for faculty who have an existing condition that might cause difficulties or put them in a high risk category for COVID exposure. So those faculty have all been notified at this point of those accommodations, and they have begun building appropriate online courses and course interfaces in order to deliver their courses fully online for the fall semester. There were a little more than a dozen of those accommodations put together. The vast majority of our classes, though, will continue to be face-to-face. In terms of students making that decision, again, we'll have an online interface that will allow students to submit those requests, and we'll try to work as closely as we can with faculty and students' advisors to process those requests quickly.
Thank you. We have a senior attending Simpson and a freshman that will be attending Wartburg. July 27th, Wartburg President Colson sent a letter to all Wartburg students notifying them that due to the current pandemic that the school understands that the students will not be receiving the full college experience. Therefore, all full-time students that are enrolled for the fall and spring semesters of this year will be receiving a 5th year of attendance at college tuition, at free tuition. The schools in the conference usually do a great job of trying to match or compare to each other when it comes to the financial packages and tuition costs. Is Simpson College considering the same?
Yes, we are considering the same. That's currently under discussion.
Your answer was shorter than the question. During the orange phase, will teachers be teaching at least 50% in person?
During the orange phase, the way that we manage classrooms is dependent upon the size of the classroom in which faculty are and how we're able to manage classrooms. So for instance, in some cases, the entire class will be entirely face-to-face for the entire semester, and that's our plan going forward. We have ample space on campus, for example, for our SC 101 courses to provide those all through face-to-face learning. In other cases, we might be on one day it's group A, one day it's group B in the class. In other cases, we might have a different kind of rotation that provides flexibility for both faculty and students in order to meet the appropriate safety guidelines. And I did see, I'll continue, I saw a question about labs. Fortunately, our lab spaces are set up in such a way that we can allow students to work in pairs around our lab tables while maintaining a 6-foot distance. And so our labs will continue to provide the same kind of hands-on learning in the sciences that they have in the past. In the case of computer science labs for information science and things like that, we have virtual desktops that students will be able to use, as well as the computer labs, and those will be available based on how the faculty want to work, and we will take out computers so that students are appropriately distanced if they're in the room together. But we recognize how important that lab experience is, particularly for collaborative learning for students. And we've worked closely with our faculty to ensure that we can meet our safety protocols while also meet the learning goals of those labs.
a number of folks are concerned that if the testing rates do not go below 5%, that they're going to be prisoners in their rooms. Can we talk a little bit about that process?
It is hard. I appreciate that. And again, we intentionally did not set our triggers from moving from one phase to another to percentages of cases. So I, again, want to point that out. But so let's say, you know, if we are not seeing the kind of exponential growth that would, or spread that would send us to red, but let's say we are seeing, you know, pretty consistent, you know, there's a couple of cases pretty regularly, that would indicate that we really need to keep things pretty tight. I know that that is not the campus life that everybody thought that they were going to be having. It certainly isn't the campus life that I want to be offering to people, which is why we are working so hard to create as many ways as we can to connect people, to have them engaging with each other, either in small groups or, again, continuing to make use of what we have learned about how to make the most out of the technology that we have available. So, you know, can we bring concerts to campus that are virtual? Do we bring movies to campus virtually through streaming contracts? So trying to create as robust as an experience as we can, but also making sure that if it doesn't look like it is safe to open things up more, our primary goal is to keep people healthy and to not be going back to a fully remote experience.
What are the visitor protocols in the orange and yellow phases should we wish to visit our child around the midterm?
So in the orange phase, people other than the people who live in that building may not be in that building. So during move-in, we are asking that students have one person who is helping them move their things in. But we really want to limit as much exposure and also to maximize social distancing in the buildings during that move-in period. And then after move-in, once we are in orange, the only people who may be in one of our residential facilities are the students who live there. Once we go to yellow, then students do have the option of having limited guests. And that is something that we're asking them to work with their roommates to determine, okay, what do we feel comfortable setting as our mutual bubble, because we're essentially living as a family unit. But once we go to yellow, like moms and dads can come back and actually come into the residence hall to be visiting. While we're in orange, the visiting has to be taking place outside the building.
Okay, we have time for just one final question. Can face shields be worn versus masks?
Oh, that's complicated. That just got way more complicated recently. So we had built into all of our protocols, based on everything that we have been seeing from the CDC, that masks or other face coverings, such as face shields. Last week, the CDC came out with a statement saying that there is not evidence that face shields are as effective. And so actually on the agenda for tomorrow's crisis management team is a discussion about, okay, what are we going to do about face shields? And do we continue to allow people to use them widely? Do we recommend that people use masks, but use face shields if for some reason wearing a mask is particularly problematic? Or do we need to treat face shields as something that somebody would seek an accommodation to be able to use in place of a mask? I will say there are very few conditions that truly, that somebody could truly not wear a mask for. And they include things like conditions where that might involve a really extreme sensory sensitivity or severe anxiety disorders, some very severe respiratory problems, though I will also tell you that most folks with respiratory issues can safely wear masks. But we would be, in the most extreme or most conservative case, we would be looking at those on a case-by-case basis using our Director of Accessibility Services to evaluate documentation. So more on that will be forthcoming about 24 hours from now. And I just want to say that I think that change about the face shields to me points out that we're dealing with a novel coronavirus. So the scientific community, the public health community, the public health experts are all learning about this as we go, as are we. And so I think that our community has done an extraordinary job in responding flexibly and nimbly and thoughtfully to all of these changes. And I know there are more changes that are going to continue to come because it's the nature of this pandemic. And what I can promise to you on behalf of the crisis management team is that we will keep you posted as we continue to roll with those changes.
Thanks, Heidi. Thank you all for participating tonight. We've enjoyed our time with you, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of the questions. My team will be working tomorrow morning to update the FAQs on the COVID website for Simpson College. We will include as many of these as we possibly can and get answers to. However, if you do have a question that we did not get to, please feel free to send it to the COVID response email address for Simpson College. We will respond to those individually there. And again, please remember to check your email. We'll be sending out notifications and we'll be communicating with you. Please also check the website. It contains a lot of valuable information and a lot of questions can be answered there. But know that we're all in this together and we want to have a great start to the academic year. We thank you all. Good night.